Welcome to Mind Love, episode 299. Today's episode is all about using emotions to tune into your subconscious mind.
I'm interested in the truth. I want to know, why did I say that? Why did I get in that same relationship pattern again? I want to not do those things. I want to not do things that are harmful to me or others. So I need to know why I'm doing what I'm doing. I want more peace. I want more kindness for myself in the world, all those things. And one of the metaphors that's really worked for me was just referring to your shadow self as the basement of your psyche. It's dark and damp down there, and there's stuff we haven't looked at in ages that need to be brought out and given away, sold in the yard sale, recycled. We push stuff into the psyche that we don't want to deal with because it's too painful. We're ashamed of it. We don't think we have the capacity to deal with it. That's why so many of us wait so long, which actually can be quite wise, to unpack trauma and all those things.
Turn up your frequency with Mind Love. Bite-sized brain hacks for seekers, dreamers, and doers. It's time to give your mind a little love with your host, Melissa Monti.
Are you ready to make some positive changes in your life? Well, hit the subscribe button to join the Mind Love movement. Our community is all about empowering each other, celebrating our wins, and supporting each other through our struggles. And with your help, we can grow even bigger and reach even more people. So hit the subscribe button and let's get started. How do you decide which direction to go? How do you know if what you're choosing is what you really want versus what you think you should want? How do you check in with yourself to see if you're still on the right track? If what you dreamed of last year is still what lights you up now? Most people don't ask themselves these types of questions at all. So even if you don't quite know the answers yet, just the fact that you're contemplating this at all already puts you in the top 1%. Whether you're starting a new business or just trying to navigate your daily life, the choices can be overwhelming. So how do you know if you're making the right decision? Are you choosing what you really want or just what you think you should want? So many people are just living on autopilot, doing what they've always done, and wondering why they're so unhappy. And at least here in America, most people are unhappy. In fact, a poll from just 2 years ago found that people are the unhappiest that they've been in 50 years. Only 14% of Americans said that they were very happy, which was down from 31% just 3 years before. And I know the last few years have been difficult, so that's somewhat expected. But I don't think people realize that their own choices play a huge part in their happiness. I feel like this is coming up a lot lately, but I also think it's really important to note that sometimes it's our choices that get us into situations that make it more likely for terrible things to happen. I can point to my 20s as evidence for this. Sexual assault, addictions, a traumatic relationship, legal trouble. So many things happened to me that at the time seemed out of my control. But I have to ask myself, why weren't these things happening to my friends who had their lives together? What came first, my choices or my problems? I'm watching the same thing happen to a family member of mine. In the last year, he's been in his second motorcycle accident, back in rehab, and was carjacked. And during the carjacking, he was stung by a bee, which he's allergic to, so he was rushed to the hospital for like 3 reasons at once. It's not like he chose most of these things. But I personally believe that when you're living out of alignment, when you don't know how to choose what's best for you on a soul level, maybe you're just more vulnerable to the crazy. 10 to 15 years ago, my life was like a bad movie. I was always trying to dig my way out of something. And now, sometimes my good luck is laughable, like too good to be true laughable. I'll give you an example. I was in Mammoth once, and it was snowy, so chains were required. Well, I got the wrong chains, so we couldn't get them on the car, and we were stuck in this parking spot on a hill trying to figure out what to do. Just then, the exact same vehicle pulled out of a parking spot and drove off, and one of his chains just neatly fell off, literally right behind my car. My jaw dropped. I even waited for like 30 minutes to see if he'd come back, and he didn't. So I put it on my wheel, and it was exactly what I needed to get out of there. Or just the other day, I went to buy emergency diapers and realized I left my wallet, which is such a bigger deal when you have to pack up a toddler and a newborn. So I was super frustrated and about to angrily pull out and go home and try again. And there was just a $20 bill stuck to a post it note right next to my tire that said, "Love you," with a smiley face. Stuff like that happens to me all the time, and I can't help but get full body chills because I just feel guided and protected. The problem is, when we're trying to make big life choices for ourselves, we stress ourselves out, which makes it even more difficult to think clearly. I've already spent so much time on this. Will my parents be disappointed? What will people think? What will make the most money? We get so logistical about everything that we forget that maybe our soul already knows what's best for us. So, how do we tap into that wisdom? How do we align with what our highest selves already know? That's what we're talking about today. Our guest is Danielle LaPorte. She's a renowned author, speaker, and entrepreneur. You've probably already heard of her because she's helped millions of people all over the globe access the power of their emotions and intuition to make better life choices. You might recognize her from her method called Desire Map, which shifts the traditional focus from setting goals to determining how you want to feel in life. Well, now she's taking this one step further, discovering how access to her inner wisdom has shifted over the years. So 3 key things we will learn are how to use shadow work to explore the basement of your psyche, how to embrace healing by releasing the wounded story, and how to tap into the heart's wisdom and guidance. Before we go deep today, I want to give you a little gift, and I want to give it to you every single day. It's called the Morning Mind Love. I know how life can be. You're all fired up after an inspiring episode, and then a new day or a new challenge comes at you, and it's just hard to keep up that energy. Well, the Morning Mind Love is kind of like an oracle from your higher self to help you start each day with a positive focus. Plus, when you sign up, you get 2 free gifts, a 30-minute binaural meditation and 30 days of journaling prompts to help you remember who you truly are. And it's all completely free. So join over 9,000 people and go to mindlove.com to sign up or text the word morning to 33777. And now let's welcome Danielle LaPorte to the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
So tell us about your shift recently from, you talked about moving from an emotion-driven life from your work with the Desire Map to a more heart-centered life.
A series of revelations and tough calls and dark nights of the soul. So important to presence that the question of how do I want to feel was like the center of my life. And it became the center of my career, my business for a long time, right? Like the Desire Map it's this whole methodology about getting clear about how you want to feel. And then that turned into a whole day planner system and a coaching system and all this stuff. And it became clear to me over time. I mean, this is like over like 7 years of faltering and learning and rising and all the things we go through, that I could be in a bad mood. I could be having a really rough time, and I still felt loving. And I still felt like I was receiving love. I still felt close to something greater than myself. And then with some research into mysticism and metaphysics and all those things, learning more about the origin of feelings and emotions, that they're really not coming from your conscious self, your higher consciousness, which isn't to say you're unconscious because you have feelings. It's part of the human experience, but they're actually coming from the unseen, unknown, shadowy, unconscious part of ourselves. Happiness and sadness, the positive and negative feelings. And that kind of combination of awareness of like, I can still feel really on purpose and connected, even if I'm having a bad day, even if I'm not feeling the way I want to feel, combined with like, our feelings are coming from a different place than I thought they were, just brought me to a new question, which is, what do I want to embody? Like, what do I want to be? What's the energy that I want to be no matter what? No matter how the podcast goes, no matter how I feel that day, no matter what somebody says to me. I think, so many of us can identify with that intention or that desire. Like, we don't want to get thrown off center, right? Like, you don't want to live in reactivity. You want to be clear and strong and ideally like compassionate, loving, no matter what's going on. And that requires a different question, which is about embodiment, not about whether you feel happy or sad that day.
Yeah, I think that's something that people can confuse, where they think that the sadness is a darkness, or which, I mean, in a way it is. It's this feeling of darkness,
Yeah.
but I remember when I was first diving into spiritual work, learning, I had these different anecdotes, like the energy that you're in when you're creating is the energy that you're spreading. And so I remember being very aware of when I was down and suddenly like not knowing if I wanted to be out there or be even creating in my business or anything like that.
Mhm.
And what I found though is that it's sometimes in those moments that I'm able to access a level of vulnerability that I'm not able to access in other areas. And it's different from maybe 10 years before when I was in a bad mood and I wanted to bring other people down. but but there's some form of bypassing when we don't give validity to the deeper emotions, or the emotions that are still very human but maybe aren't those
Pleasant.
high vibration, yeah, pleasant, like this is who she wants to be type thing.
This is a really good point because I experience the same thing of just like, I know, I know conceptually energy follows thought. So like, what's the energy of the thought I'm having? Is it a positive thought? Great, I'm going to get more positivity. Is it a negative, heavy thought? And then I'm going to attract and manifest more heaviness, all that stuff. But the shift there to make is that you're loving and accepting of whatever is happening. And you're going to get more of that, right? Like you're going to get more things to love. That's the higher vibration. So it's like, you could be feeling super depressed and resentful and jealous and some low vibe stuff. That is low vibe stuff. There's no arguing that. And you really have a choice at that point. You're either going to get down on yourself and say, I'm not spiritual enough, I'm not evolved enough. And that's just more like self loathing and hatred. And that's what you're going to get more of. Or you can choose to really not do the spiritual bypass and love what's going on. It's like, wow, jealousy is a part of me, obsessiveness is a part of me, and I'm in charge. And I can love on all of those fragmented, low vibe part. I can be high vibe enough to love, make space for, actually have a conversation with the low vibe parts of myself. And that's from where you're manifesting. Like, I'm spacious. I'm loving, I'm creative. Like I feel it right now. I just, at the time of us at this present time recording this conversation, I've just got back from Mexico and I live in a cold climate. I live in Vancouver, BC. It's really rainy. I love the city, but it hasn't been great on my lungs. I'm putting that in past tense. In the past, it wasn't really great on my lungs. So I like fled to Mexico. Just like, I need sun or I'm going to get really, really, really sick. And the energy that I brought there was this kind of desperate energy. It was really like this running. It looked like self-love. Like, I'm going to do loving thing for my body and my health. And I'm going to get to a warm climate to heal my asthma. But the energy underneath it was, I'm escaping, I'm running, I'm desperate to get healthy. I can't be healthy wherever I am. And so I manifested a lot of challenges when I got there. Like, for one of the hotels, as soon as I walked in, mold. I mean, I'm so sensitive to all this stuff now. It's just like, and I said to my man, like, don't even put your bags down. We got to go. And the next place, so noisy, I couldn't sleep. Like, all I wanted was sleep. So if I would have, I'm telling the story to like just identify like how we make the choice. If I would have gone with the energy of like, I'm going to heal myself instead of I'm running away because I can't take it, I'm desperate for healing, I probably would have had a very different trip when I got there. I got it towards the end of the trip, took 3 weeks. And finally, I got to the place of like, you know what? I can heal no matter what because I am loving, I am spacious, I'm strong. And then the trip shifted and I got some sleep.
I don't know why it took me so long to invest in good bedding. I resisted it for years, but something flipped in me about 3 years ago. And now I'm basically a pillow connoisseur. I've tried them all, and I get weirdly excited about good bedding. Because here's the thing, we spend a third of our lives in bed, and the quality of that time affects literally everything else, which is why I'm so excited to tell you about my latest obsession, Lagoon Sleep Pillows. What sets them apart is their matching system. You take a quick 2-minute quiz about your sleep style and your preferences, and then they match you with your perfect pillow. I was matched with their Otter pillow, and I am so impressed. Lately, I've just needed more support, and this seems to cradle me in all the right places. I'm also low-key obsessed with their travel pillow, which I use for way more than just travel. I actually hug it, use it as leg support, and of course, take it on trips with me. Well, the secret is in their adjustable fill. You can add or remove it to get that perfect alignment for your spine. A study even found that the right supportive pillow can improve sleep quality by 63%. And Lagoon lets you try their matched pillow for 100 nights risk-free. Free returns, no questions asked. Falling asleep has never been easier. I toss and turn less and just wake up feeling refreshed every morning. Go to lagoonsleep.com and take their awesome 2-minute sleep quiz to find your match. Use the code MIND for 15% off your first purchase. You know what's interesting about mindfulness? It's not just about being present in the moment. It's about being thoughtful about the future. We meditate, we exercise, we work on ourselves, all to create a better tomorrow, right? But there's one piece of the future planning puzzle that nobody likes to talk about. I get it. Life insurance feels heavy. But here's the thing. Just like meditation is an act of self-care, getting life insurance is an act of family care. It's about making sure your love continues to support your family, even when you're not there to do it yourself. That's why I want to tell you about Select Quote. They're one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience helping over 2 million customers. Their licensed insurance agents work for you to tailor a life insurance policy for your individual needs in as little as 15 minutes. And here's what's cool. They actually reward you for taking care of yourself. If you're in good health, they work with carriers that could get you same-day coverage for up to $5 million, no medical exam required. And it's way more affordable than you might think. You could even get coverage for up to $1 million for as little as $20 per month. We just did this all recently after putting it off for years, and I can't tell you the peace of mind just from getting it done. So get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/mindlove. Go to selectquote.com/mindlove today to get started. That's selectquote.com/mindlove. It's funny because just like an hour and a half ago, I had prepared for this and I've read your book before in the last couple of weeks. And then this morning I was kind of re-going over some of the key points I wanted to bring in. And I was just feeling the really high vibrational energy, right? And I had about an hour and a half and I was like, I need to go to UPS to return some things. And so I went in, I returned a bunch of stuff, came out. I'm 9 months pregnant right now. So
Wow.
yeah, yeah. And so I come out and I slip on ice and I felt pretty hard on my knee and I caught myself to where, I don't think I feel fine, but my knee hurts pretty badly. But there was nobody really around. And I just went into a full blown panic attack. I was just like crying and because it was just like that flash. I could cry right now. I'm a little raw, but the only people around where this couple ran up to me and it just happened to be a paramedic and his wife. And so he's calming me and she holds me and she's just co-regulating my nervous system. And I'm just like crying. And then he prayed over me and they walked me to my car and like made sure I was good. And I got home and it took me a while. I was still pretty emotional, but my thoughts were after I got over like what just happened, then I was just like, really? Like now my face is all puffy. I have this interview I've been looking forward to. Like, why is this happening? And the moment that I said that in my mind, I was reminded of a quote in your book where you said, what if we asked why things are happening for us instead of before we ask them to be changed? And
Yeah.
I'm not saying I wanted to fall or anything like that, but in my mind, I ended up just kind of doing a heart centered meditation. And when I said earlier how sometimes in those darker moments I'm able to access this level of vulnerability, it was just this message of, because I was like, now I just feel so raw. And I just heard this voice like, exactly, like you need the vulnerability for this podcast. And I was like, oh, wow. And so I just had my moment reclaiming my energy. But it was just kind of this interesting thing, like, where on one hand it felt so out of control and kind of random and it hurt. On the other hand, it's like a paramedic and his wife and they're coming and they're like, they said all the right, it was exactly who I needed to be there in that moment, and apparently exactly the energy I needed to be in when I was going into this interview. But it's just been one of those days, and the more that I trust that I am being guided and that everything's happening exactly as it should, it just sort of unfolds this. Like, I feel a little bit different than I would have if I would have gone into this interview 2 hours ago, but it's in this good way. Like, I'm ready to spill, I'm ready to kind of just be the
Yeah.
vessel, like what needs to occur now. So that's been my morning.
Oh, good one. Yeah, that's so moving. What a great experience to be prayed over, right? Like, even if I don't know what your belief system is, who knows what his belief system actually is, but I just find it so touching. The few experiences I've had where people have been so themselves that they have prayed over me. I find that so moving. And who knows what channel it opened for you, but what I hear in that, like if I would just take that experience for myself is again, it's what we're both talking about like the choice, because you could look at that, or anybody who's listening, and like you get into a fender bender or whatever the hard thing is, and you could say to yourself, first of all, it's such an act of consciousness to say, why is this happening? And then to be loving with it. But someone could not say why, not ask, and just be like, that ruined my day, and pregnant and me and interview, and I got to put my mascara back on, and shitty day and all those things. When I have close calls like that, instead of thinking, my God, that car almost hit me, I think, look how protected I am. That car didn't hit me. And it's like a huge paradigm shifter. Like, look how protected you are. You got a paramedic who prays, and his wife. Like, bumps are gonna happen. We're gonna slip, we're gonna hurt things, even in sacred times of like, when's your due date?
February 22nd.
February. Oh, you're gonna have a Pisces. No, you'll have
Yes.
an Aquarius. Yeah. Yeah. Is this your first baby?
No, second. And my last one was due on February 22nd as well.
Oh, wow.
But he was born on the 24th. He's a Pisces, though. So it's probably going to be two Pisces, I think.
Cool. Oh yeah, you will have a Pisces. Sorry. My son is born very close to that. And
It's the
I remember
cusp.
he was holding on. It's very cuspy. He was holding on because I know he wanted to be a Pisces because, well, he is who he is, but just that tenderness that they have. Yeah.
That's exactly how I felt. It was just, and it's been my greatest focus. And I keep saying that lately life has been like the Instagram algorithm, like really creepy, where you say something out loud and all of a sudden it just presents itself to you. And so my focus has been just really feeling that guidance, feeling that relationship. And so, yeah, I don't know that man's beliefs, but I believe in the power of
Mhm.
prayer, intention. It's the same energy for me. So I'm able to receive it regardless of the place that I trust the place that it came from, is basically what I'm getting at. And so what I got in that moment though was that I've been asking for guidance and trying to spend more time in that place to develop the relationship, because so often we're like, yeah, I want this, but we're not willing to spend the time to create the space, to have the stillness in order to develop it. And so that's what my focus has been. And when I came back home, I probably would have ended up doing some other tasks first and then doing the interview, but instead, the only thing I could really handle in that moment was just recalibrating my energy. And so I ended up in my own meditation, and I was reminded by another quote in your book that basically was about how we so often are looking for these higher thoughts outside of ourselves, searching for quotes, reading more books, and I find those things helpful. But the greatest thing that we can do is really just tune into ourselves and realize that those higher thoughts aren't outside of ourselves. They're right there. And so instead of being like, okay, well, what do I need? I need somebody else to come comfort me. I need this. I'm grateful for what came to me. And then I was able to just sort of tune in and give myself the rest and, see what came through in those moments. And I ended up kind of hearing my own guidance. This is exactly, I'm fine. And it's exactly how it was supposed to happen. And really focusing on that heart space, which was a great reminder from your book. You talk about how the heart is the greatest source of electromagnetic energy in our bodies. And I know that I can get caught in my head and I have all of these higher thoughts in there, memorized or my own, but I can feel it. It's like I can feel myself living in my head. And so I took that time to just move down into my heart and just feel until I felt calm. And I just knew that it was exactly what I was supposed to do.
It's right there. Inspiring. It's what I need today too. Every day. Yeah.
You talk about how in order to really get these messages, or it's like a healing work, but you talk about how our greatest work in this lifetime is making the unconscious conscious. And I'd love to hear just go deeper on that, because I know for some people that might sound completely foreign, and for others, there's this sort of balance between, oh, well, what's shadow work? Do I go in the past? Do I go in the future? And there just seems to be a lot of confusion. I've been getting a lot of questions lately. So when you talk about making the unconscious conscious, what is your process, or what does that look like?
I would say that's my shorthand definition of shadow work. And I want to know, I'm interested in the truth. Like, I want to know, why did I say that? Why did I get in that same relationship pattern again? I want to not do those things. I want to not do things that are harmful to me or others. So I need to know why I'm doing what I'm doing. I need to know why I'm getting certain results, because I want better results. And by better, I mean I want more peace. I want more kindness for myself in the world, all those things, And so I'm really curious about the source of things. And one of the metaphors that's really worked for me, I wish I could give somebody credit for this, but it came up in therapy and then with another energy healer I worked with, was just referring to your shadow self as the basement of your psyche. And it's really useful metaphor because it's dark and damp down there, and there's stuff we haven't looked at in ages that need to be brought out and given away, sold in the yard sale, recycled. And stuff tends to hide down there, or we push stuff into the psyche that we don't want to deal with because it's too painful. We're ashamed of it. We don't think we have the capacity to deal with it. That's why so many of us wait so long, which actually can be quite wise, to unpack trauma and all those things. And then my experience, which this is nothing extraordinary, this is what, every mystic and psychologist talks about. It's like the light is actually in the dark, because what you have to do is you have to love what you find in the basement of your psyche. So you're going to find all your gnarly stuff. You're going to find your manipulativeness and your neediness and all that stuff, all the reasons you're in coaching or therapy, or all those things you don't want people to know about you. That's in the basement. And so shadow work isn't just you bring your shit up and you look at it and you try and change it. That is the misperception. And that's why we end up in therapy way too long. That's how we use self-help to just become self-criticism. It's you go in, you get the gnarly stuff and you love it. You actually have a conversation with it. You actually, and this is kind of what, How to Be Loving, the book is all about. You get to a point of some reverence for it. So it's like, can you find the gift in your doubts without trying to make your doubts fearless or faithful? Like, here's another metaphor. This is all house metaphors. Like, if a friend came to your doorstep and they were terrified, They were embodying fear. You wouldn't say to them, you need to not be scared. You wouldn't do that. You're a loving person. You take them in and you would speak to their fears. You would be gentle with their fears. You're actually making space for their fear. That's love. That's accepting what is. So you find your fear in the basement and you don't say, you need to be courageous. That just creates more schisms, more anxiety in the system. And then the panic comes up in the times when it gets crunchy, you know? So that's how shadow work is actually light work, because when you go into the basement, you find out how loving you are. You find out how powerful you are, because you're going to take all of that stuff and you're going to be your most loving, parental, goddess-like self with it. And then it kind of winks at you. Your doubt says, see, I'm useful. I'm useful. Hi, I'm your doubt. Don't I make you more faithful every time I show up? Look at me. And you can also, like, you know, I use that term parenting, because lots of us relate to that, is you just find out how powerful and loving you are. And you really take the lead. Like, it's not about putting your doubt and all your neuroses in the front seat. It's about saying, I have room for you, and this is where I'm going to put you. I love you. You get to be doubtful. You get to be fearful, but you're going to sit at the back of the bus. Oh, I know. I heard you. I heard you. I'll listen to you tomorrow in meditation. But you're with me, and I'm still going to launch. I'm still going to fall in love. I'm still going to say what I need to say publicly, because I am light. I am love, and I am running this show.
And so it sounds like the focus is more on really confronting the emotion and the feeling that's there versus retelling the story that might have brought that up in the first place.
Such a good point. Yes. Yes, this is such a genius noticing, because do we need to retell stories? Yeah, once or twice. Witness it, love it, observe it, unpack it, be heard, go to therapy for sure. But then enough. You're not what happened to you. You're not what somebody called you. You're not what your father said you were when you were 13. You're not that. You're bigger. You're a whole soulful person with capacities. You're actually made of, it's really pure energy, a lot of us would call love. And enough with the retelling. The ego mind loves to keep telling. Oh my God. And you keep telling the same, you keep retelling the story about how you got wounded or betrayed, all really shitty, legit things. And you will attract more of that. It's just how it works. I mean, we can get into the metaphysics of that, like the energy of what happened in the past and the retelling of the story. It's just like you're keeping that energy alive and you're carrying it around with you. And that energy is magnetic. It's like walking around, like bouncing this ball wherever you go. And someone just keeps looking at the ball and it's just like, that bad thing happened. I have this, I got betrayed again. I got left again. I'm broke again. It happened. Compassion. Put the ball down. Tell a new story. That happened to me. I rose above it. I mean, let's go back to me in Mexico and asthma. The learning of that trip, this is really, I could cry. Like, this is the raw stuff for me right now, is I have been in this story of my self-compassion kind of has gotten into a little bit of self-pity. It's hard having asthma and living in Vancouver and doing what I do and all that stuff. My health is really compromised right now. And I've been negotiating with the darkness. Like, do I have to move? What do I have to do and I'm just like, I've been, here, I can be more specific. I've been identifying as a sick person. I'm not a sick person. I am all those things I just described for everybody else. Like, I'm a soul with all these powerful energies. I'm made of love itself. And my body has some challenges. I can heal them and live wherever I want. I got to stop telling the story of how hard it is for me to live where I live and what it does to my lungs.
You know what's funny? We spend so much time feeding our minds, reading books, listening to podcasts, learning new things, but then we grab whatever's convenient to feed our bodies. And I get it. Life is busy, and sometimes a drive-through feels like the only option. But that's why I take Field of Greens. It's a greens powder made with whole organic fruits and vegetables. No extracts, no lab-made stuff, and just 1 scoop a day gives you simple, real nutrition. Field of Greens feeds your body with fruits and vegetables medically chosen to support your heart, vital organs, and immune system. And let me tell you something. Since I started taking it, I've noticed these little changes that show me how nutrient depleted I must have been before. Like the ridges in my nails, gone. My sleep, so much better. And my stomach just feels happy. You know that dreaded afternoon crash that has you reaching for more coffee or sugary snacks? Well, that's not happening for me anymore. When your body is actually nourished, it runs so much better. I've tried other greens powders before, but Field of Greens is genuinely different. The quality is next level and you can taste it. It's become my go-to, especially on those days when my eating isn't exactly Instagram worthy, because we all have those days, right? And here's the thing. They are so confident that you'll love it too, that they offer a 100% money-back guarantee. That's how much they believe in their product. So I got you 15% off your first order and free rush shipping. Visit fieldofgreens.com and use promo code MINDLOVE. That's promo code MINDLOVE at fieldofgreens.com. fieldofgreens.com.
And so when you go through that process and you stop telling that story, I love
The
it.
ego squirm.
Yeah.
That's what happened. Yeah.
And I love what you say about how when we start to look at the ego, not necessarily as the enemy, although Ryan Holiday might have something to say about that, but as behavioral patterns. I find that really
Yes.
freeing. A long time ago, I did an episode with someone, and the title was The Ego and God Are One. And he basically was going off about how everyone's demonizing the ego, but it's this part of ourselves, and
Yeah.
and it's a big part of the human part of ourselves, and in rejecting the ego, we're also rejecting a part of ourselves. And so to see it as a behavioral pattern is something that's like, because I've understood that, okay, just embrace, accept my ego. But there's something very freeing about seeing it as that behavioral pattern, because there was something very freeing when I understood how my mind worked when I was healing all of my trauma from my 20s. And I'm like, I feel like I'm just broken. I have all these things. I have so many things that I need to heal. And yes, I do believe I can heal them, but why do I have so much more than everybody else? And that was my story. But then when I started to understand, well, you just pick them off one by one, you change the pattern. And so the same thing with the ego, with these parts of myself that I thought maybe were bad parts of myself. Maybe I could never be who I wanted to be. And so seeing it as that allowed me to release it in such a way where instead of resisting it so often, I was able to work with it. And I'm still working with it, and I probably always will be, And so,
As long as you have a mind, you're going to have an ego. The mind manufactures the ego. So I'm on the side that includes everybody. But the ego is not the enemy. You made it. This is, what the other gentleman was saying is the ego and God are one. Yeah. Let me give you a really feminine, motherly description of that. The ego is your mind, baby. You make it. You create it. What if you looked at the ego as one of your children, and it's one of your more annoying kids? It's your kid on its worst. It's your kid on its most needy, unmet, manipulative, just trying to be loved self. Like one of the terms I offer in How to Be Loving, which is a nod to, I really love this teacher, Adyashanti, who uses this phrase, egoing. So the way I break that down is, so obviously, ego is more of a verb. It's a way of being, a behavior, as you mentioned, is that instead of, when you do something, some poor behavior, some low vibe thing, instead of saying, oh, I need to get my ego in check. That was so egocentric of me. That was so unevolved, so unspiritual. No, that's where the ego becomes the enemy. And it's just more fracture, more fight. And just even the energy in that, you can just hear it. It's just, who wants that? You can just say to yourself, oh, I was egoing. That's it. And which is, instead of being loving, I was egoing. I just forgot for a minute, when I was being a bit of a dick, I forgot that I'm actually loving and compassionate. I was egoing. So much more gentle, so much more medicinal. You've taken the charge out. And what happens is the mind, the ego self, the unhealed self, the shadow, all the same thing, just starts to relax. What you're doing when you keep loving your ego is you keep saying, I love you. I'm not going to fight with you. And then it doesn't have to yell so loud and say, look at me, I'm so needy. Here's an anxiety attack, or here's more striving, or here's another big, ridiculous goal. Look at me. The ego mind will say, it just feels like, oh, you're looking at me. Okay, maybe I don't need to go crush a bunch of goals today. Maybe I don't need to have you feel all this shame. Okay, you saw me. All right, you saw me.
I've had a lot of random kind of addictive patterns, like even I bit my nails for most of my life and I finally healed that. But it's one of those things that I'm
How'd you do
reminded
that?
of. Oh, a lot of things, but one of the ways was noticing my energy in my body when I'd be compelled to be just kind of picking. And so it went from like biting pretty hardcore to always picking, and I just could not grow them, or I would for a minute and then I'd break one, and then it was just a whole thing. But they were bad, like really low, painful all the time. I remember I used to hate doing laundry because something about getting the wet clothes out would just be too raw on my fingertips. Like it was not good. And one of the biggest parts of healing that, other than giving it a lot of love, like actually trying to take care of the little nubs that I had, because it brought a different energy to it, but was I would find myself in certain situations and I would ask myself, well, why now and not an hour ago? Like what's different about now? And I could tell there was like pent up energy in my hands, and I could feel the tension in my body whenever I was compelled to do something like that. So I would, at first, I tried to just do something different. Like I would sit on my hands or whatever. That didn't really work. I would find myself like just wanting to pull them out. And so I would just breathe into them and instead focus on seeing how calm I could get my hands. And I would just breathe and picture the breath going into my fingertips. And it was the same process that I learned when I was healing myself from bulimia, was noticing that same energy around that compulsive action. And so I would breathe into my diaphragm, which during those times, I always noticed that I'd feel very contracted, like I'd want to be hiding my abdominal area. And so instead, I would do the opposite, and I'd breathe into it and expand my diaphragm and not worry about what it looked like or whatever it was. So basically, do the opposite of what the compulsion was telling me to do. And so, in these same ways, that's how I look at that kind of egoic nature of wanting to judge or whatever. It was actually happening when I was reading your book. I was reading something very loving, and I got distracted by Facebook, and I scrolled and I saw something, and I was just like, she always posts the weirdest stuff on Facebook. And then I was like, I had that moment where I'm just like, what is this energy? You know, like I post weird stuff on Facebook. People will probably think I'm a weirdo. And so I like just breathed into it. And it's just funny. It's the same energy, just in different parts of my body that's creating this compulsion. And what I've noticed is all I have to do is really breathe into it and change maybe it's the nervous system or the tension, release the tension. And so it reminds me of what you were just saying about how, we have this egoic pattern and we're resisting it. And all that causes is more of those same behaviors or similar behaviors, versus just, to me, that breathing into it is the acceptance and the allowance. But for me, that's been able to actually pivot the behavior.
That's great. There's so many growth points in there. The breath is love. The breath is love. Like, here we are, mind love, right? The breath is, you are bringing your consciousness, your attention, you're bringing life force to something that's actually resisting life. And it's the most powerful. I think it's the most powerful physical hyphen spiritual tool we have is breath. Yeah, conscious breath. I mean, obviously, breath is life, but conscious breath to where it is. And I had to hear this so many times from so many psychotherapists and healers and friends. It just breathe into it. And, the ego mind is saying it cannot be that simple. There's got to be another 10 steps to this. To just make it more difficult. But, one powerful practice for me over the last couple of years has been box breathing, where you just inhale for 4 counts, hold it for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4, and repeat. And if you can just do like 3 cycles of that, what you're really doing is you're saying, body, I'm here for you. Emotions, I'm here for you. Spirit, I am allowing you to move through me. And even the word inspiration is about breath, breath is it.
It reminds me of what you say about we'll keep going back for more pain until we realize that we are not the wound. And I think that's what the big shift was for me in all of those things, because it was hard not to see so many similar but very different patterns and just like wonder if I'm broken. And so it was really when I released that story, and for me one of those steps was actually turning it into my superpower as well. It's like, man, look how committed you are to even the worst things. Imagine if you were able to shift your focus to something amazing. And so that became my goal. It's like, all of these patterns are taking up so much space. All I have to do is release them one by one and replace them with something new. And it was over time. It was that self belief that I wasn't broken, that I wasn't the wound. It was just something to be tended to, something to be healed. And to tend to it, I spent a lot of years ignoring it. And I thought that was going to be a way to move through it. But I didn't realize that it was also, like you talk about, the inner child that's just kind of screaming for that attention. And so, like you said a few minutes ago, I see you. And for me, it was asking, well, what is this need really? Because it's not a real need to self-harm and peel my fingernails off, or or whatever it is.
What was the need for you?
It was a lack of an outlet of expressing emotions from, I think, previous traumas. I did not allow myself to feel a lot of things, and so I think there were a lot of stuck emotions in my body. So I went through yeah, kind of a dark night of the soul in the beginning of healing. I was like, I thought this was supposed to feel good, but there was an outpouring of a lot of pent up grief and loneliness and just trauma, I suppose, but it needed to be felt without adding to the story. And so for me, that was, I the times I had tried to feel it before, it was just me getting in my head, woe is me, self-pity party. But when I started to feel it and actually release it instead of feel it and hold on to it with whatever story I had about it, tell it over and over again and then cry harder, that didn't work for me. But the releasing, just the feeling and just focusing on where those sensations were in the body versus the story that I had attached to them or that were attached to them. That's how, I think, one by one, and it wasn't that easy. It wasn't like, oh, now all these behaviors are cleared up.
Yeah,
There's a good 7 more years of figuring that out. But I understood that it needed to be, whatever it was holding on to needed to be released, whether that was the nervous energy of biting my fingernails or whether it was the grief that I had been holding on to since I was 19.
Love it.
So one of the things that you talk about is there's a lot about self-acceptance in your book, which I think is just the way you describe so many things is almost like poetry. I loved reading your book, but you talk about accepting even your resistance. What does that look like in practice?
Super practical. It's well, here's a good example. Resistance around forgiving, right? We all know cognitively, and in our hearts, forgiveness is the way to go. It would make a lot of things a lot better. But then there's usually resistance to forgiving, right? There's an injury, harm has been done, perceived harm, emphasis on perceived, because it's not always intended. And the bypass is you forgive it when you really haven't processed the emotional impact. And that's just, you'll never, like, faux forgiving is just, it's really kind of a step backwards because it's going to come up again. So you can just pray to get assistance with forgiving. It's like, I'm resistant to forgiving, but I want to forgive. I'm resistant to being loving right now, but I want to love. I'm resistant to breaking out of my box or being more prosperous, or most of us are resistant to what we want the most because it's going to require some shift. And the ego wants you to stay the way you are. The mind doesn't want growth. The unhealed self is so comfortable and familiar with being unhealed. So like, doesn't really want you to take any quantum leaps. So I think when the resistance comes up, you just be like, okay, it's there. That's easier said than done. But like, no judgment about this resistance. And you can ask for it to be dissolved. Whether you're asking your higher self or your heart or your unseen guides, whatever works for you. And then in a more psychological sense, you could celebrate that resistance often means that change is happening. There's actually studies done on this. So, you go to the gym, you make your resolution, and you're on day 5 of going to the gym and you're feeling great. And then week 3, you're just like, I'm going to stay home and eat some chips. The resistance that's happening to get yourself to really entrain that new behavior means that a new behavior is actually starting to take root on both a psychological and cellular level. And if you can, instead of fighting your resistance at that moment, but just, and I know this sounds a little counterintuitive because you just like, aren't you supposed to overcome your resistance? Well, how does that really work? It doesn't really work, because you can keep overcoming your resistance and pressing it down, actually just putting your resistance, the voice of it, in the basement. It's going to come back up. You're going to quit 3 months later and never go back, or you're going to leave the job that really could have been a beautiful career opening. Just, wow, I'm resistant. I don't want to go. Doesn't mean I'm a loser. Doesn't mean I'm going to fail at this. It's just a part of me. It's one of my mind babies that I created. Interesting. I have space for it. I'm going to take it to the gym with me. Big difference. It's the same. It's my same approach that I'm really on my soapbox about right now, about overcoming fear. Do not waste your energy trying to overcome your fear. You created your fear. You made it. Why would you want to annihilate, fight with, offend anything that you created? Any of your mind children? Don't. Fear wants attention. Give it some attention. Take it with you. It doesn't rule, but it will rule you if you don't pay attention to it. It will be the noisiest kid in the class.
I love this visualization of a mind baby. Like, just because I have a toddler, and sometimes his fits make me love him more. Like his little face, the way his mouth does the thing when he cries really hard. And I'm just like, you're crying over the dumbest thing, but you're so cute and I love you so much. You know what I mean? And so
that carries through to adulthood. Yeah. Like, you're crying. We could say that to ourselves all the time. Like, so often it's like, you're crying over the dumbest thing. You actually care about what somebody else who doesn't even know you thinks about you, but I get it. Cry. You good? Let's go. Yeah.
Pregnancy has definitely brought that to light. It's funny because most of this pregnancy I've been like so different from the last one. I'm just not emotional. And then like last month hit and I'm like, there's a dog out there that's limping. And I don't know the story, but it looks so sad. And so it's just falling apart. Yeah. But it's been a really great practice for me because I am so aware of that, of how ridiculous certain things are. And it sheds light on, yes, these things are even less serious than some of the other stuff, but how serious are the other things anyways? How serious were the things when I wasn't pregnant? I know that they feel serious in the moment. My whole body feels like it's serious when I'm crying over the strange dog limping or whatever I cry about in that moment, or the fact that my husband ate the last orange and it's all I want. It feels like a big deal. And the amount of times I've even had to say to him, I know this is ridiculous, but it feels like a big deal. And I've even thought in those moments, I should bring this phrase with me outside of pregnancy, to remind myself that half of the things, they just don't matter in the long run. And if I can have that awareness, that perspective, I'd be much better off. So, one of the things that you talk about also that I loved is even more empowering than realizing that everything is happening for us is knowing that it's happening through us. What do you mean by that?
That we're not victims, which isn't to say victimizing things don't happen. I mean, lots of us, we're really minded in our own business and something comes for us, for sure. It's that I believe that the soul, my higher self, is dispensing lessons, opportunities, karma to clean up, challenges, blessings all the time. There's like a higher purpose. There's a bigger vision that I can't always see or appreciate. But like the challenge is for me to dot, dot, dot. You can fill in the blank. Usually it's just all challenges are facilitating healing. That's the answer. Whether it's asthma or anxiety or any kind of loss or shame or all the things. So that perspective for myself frees me up, that I trust that everything happens for a reason. And it doesn't mean I don't meet things with total compassion. Like, the most terrible things have happened to many people. And I wouldn't, the first thing I would say to them would not be, well, you manifested this and it's happening for a reason. The loving response, the most conscious, love, intelligent, I think love is really the only intelligence response to have to any hardship for anybody is compassion. And you leave room for mystery. Like, it's how interesting that this is your karma right now. You don't even need to really get into that. Like, let's burn through it. Let's heal this with compassion and creating conditions of healing and right action, in Buddhist terms, right speech, right action, right livelihood, all those things. But I can't believe that things are random. It's not my experience that things are random. I was open to believing. Is that true? No, I was never even really open to believing in randomness. But my life experience of, my hardships and challenges have always proven to expand me. Always, every single one. I'm more compassionate. I end up being more creative. I end up being more resourceful and resilient. I end up being way more peaceful on the other side of every challenge that gets healed. Every time. Life has never let me down on that one. Yeah, it's always expanding. The universe, this, scientific basic, the universe is always expanding, and you are included in that.
Yeah, you say our soul is always leading us toward expansion. And that's been my experience as well. And
Mm.
I used to be able to see it better in hindsight. And maybe that's still true. But what I've found in the last, especially 5 years, I'm able to see it while it's happening much more often
Mm.
because I've expanded my awareness enough, or I've created the neural pathways, or the open mindedness, or the beliefs. And so there's a groove there that I start to naturally fall into where I am crying on the ice, asking, why is this happening for me? Versus resisting it for so long, fighting it against it until I feel like I'm in a better place. And then all of a sudden I'm able to look back and say, oh, well, now I kind of see, it sort of opens up. But it's funny
Yeah.
because, yeah, in that moment, I, I wasn't sure because the wife had told me, you know, you might want to just go to the ER, get checked out. And I had a feeling I was fine, but like, do I really have to go to the ER and cancel this interview right now? And you and I had an interview scheduled back in in December, and it was one of the three times that I had to go to the ER was that day, and I had to cancel the interview kind of last minute. And because I couldn't keep food or water down, and my midwife was like, you should probably go get some fluids. And I'm like, really? I have to cancel this interview? But I was not in a good place. So I did. And I'm like, I'm
I
not doing it
guarantee you, I
again.
probably thought, oh, this is so good because I was so down with asthma. Yeah. So there you go.
And so I was able, though, like I sat in my car and I accessed my higher wisdom, and I just knew I was fine. I could feel baby moving, everything was good. And like I said, I got this other sort of message from it. And I was like, okay, well, I'm ready. And so I'm curious for you. You had talked about how you were having this hard time. And I know how much more difficult it is when there's a physical problem, when your health doesn't feel good. How are you bringing in the divine perspective to move through that, to not identify with the things you've been identifying with? Like, what is your process?
Yeah, not easy. I have great cheerleaders. I mean, just this morning, like my man was like, babe, you are so much light. You could walk down the street and just kill mold in a 2 block radius. And I was like, I gotta believe that. Like that's it. And I just realized like, wow, this is my own medicine because I am identifying as the wound, as the sick, right? I meditate almost every day. And sometimes I don't think it's having I can't see the immediate benefit in it. I feel more centered and more peaceful. And some days I just feel like I checked it off my list. As a good spiritual girl, I got it done. But it's that practice. I was going to call it work, but it isn't work once you really hit your stride. Once you find out what works for you, it's not work. Um, it's that practice that has my thinking be more gentle. That's it. It softens my mind. So my mind isn't as ferocious all the time. And so I access my heart more. And how I look at it, very esoterically is that when we sit, when we're still meditative, contemplative, with the intention to like align with the divine, to align with love, then that light, that consciousness light will drop into us. And so it's not like I can't say, well, I'm journaling. I can do all those things. Like I could write a love letter right now, and maybe I should, to my asthma, and it will tell me something, and maybe there'll be something useful in there that will help me soften even more. Um, but I think it's just the shifting becomes more gentle, and I identify, and this is it, I identify with my true nature. I identify with my true nature, which is I'm the healer. I am light. I am light. I am a vessel for light. The universe, God, is the light source. Someday I'll realize that I am the light source. Not quite there. Yeah. And sometimes going back to the past does work. I mean, past referencing, my perspective with that now is if you use it for the right reasons, it can be medicine. So, like there's an exercise we do in my heart-centered membership where just to get the mind to soften and for the attention to really go on the heart, we say like begin this exercise with recalling a beautiful memory with someone that you love. Yes, we're going back to the past. And that's useful. So another utility of the past with getting clear on like your true identity is I look at all the things I have overcome before and I got this one and I'll get the next one because I did it before and before and before.
Well, thank you so much for all of the wisdom that you brought to this episode. And I love leaving listeners with something to focus on, whether it's a practice or just a final message, just to drill in everything that we've discussed in this episode throughout the week. What would you give to our listeners?
Well, first of all, thank you. This was a great back and forth and you've got so much wisdom of your own. It was really lovely. Yeah. Good luck with baby number 2. A practice, I would say, is we've actually hit on many of them in this conversation. One is asking why. And you don't always need to know the answer and you don't always need to ask. So like, here's the thing with quote spiritual practices. It's not one size fits all. And one practice doesn't apply to all the events in your life, but maybe sometimes if something happens and you ask the why before, how do I get out of this? It might be really beneficial. So there's that. We've talked about breathing really, really, really. But here's the kind of refinement we can give to that. Breathe into the heart chakra. You can take any problem and see it in the center of your heart and bring it breath and light, and it will loosen, it will heal. Yeah. And then the third thing I would say is tone. Just watch your tone with yourself, gentle tone. So, when you mess up, just speak to yourself really kindly about it. We want to change. We want to grow. We want to be on time. We want to be better. Yes. Gentle approach to improvement. And then it's actually improvement. Yeah.
Well, thank you again. I know that I'm leaving in a totally different energy than I arrived in. And so my nervous system is regulated. I feel great. So for listeners that are resonating as much as I am, and those who want to connect with your new book, where's the best place for them to find you and all of your offerings online?
Yeah, the book is everywhere. But really the center of my universe is Danielle LaPorte.com. And there's all sorts of beautiful things there's a book, there's a deck, there's a journal, there's my regular offerings and classes, and DanielleLaPorte.com is it. And I'm everywhere on social. Yeah.
All the links for this episode will be at mindlove.com/299. Your challenge for this week is to deepen your relationship with yourself by starting that inner dialogue. So start expecting that you already have the answers somewhere. So instead of leaning into the energy of stress and confusion and overwhelm, just breathe into that heart chakra. Place your energy right where your heart is and breathe. The breath alone will help you to release some of that stress. But that's how we tune in to the energy of that space, is just by placing our attention there. And then either ask a question or sit in stillness and see what arises. But expect that you already have the answers somewhere. And see how that changes your dialogue with yourself. See how that changes how you access your own wisdom. And let me know how it goes. Reach out to me on Instagram at mindlovemelissa. But I get it. There's a lot of choices that we make every single day. I believe I've heard 35,000 choices that we make every single day. But remember, this is a fun process. You are crafting your life right now. You're building the situation that you want to be in. But I've got some good news for you. If you need a little help with that, this is exactly why I created the Mind Love membership. It's because there's so many things to intentionally create, like our goals and our discipline and our habits and priming our minds for change and our purpose. So for each of these big things, I've not only created masterclasses, but I've also partnered with some of the top guests on the show to create even more masterclasses for you to access. Each of these will hold your hand through designing one of these very important parts of your life. And new ones are coming up every single month. So you can find out more information at mindlove.com/membership. You also get a ton of meditations, access to early release episodes, and ad-free listening. So find out more at mindlove.com/membership. You can also find all of my sponsors at mindlove.com/sponsors. And if you love this episode, please consider sharing it. Just take a screenshot and tag Mind Love Melissa and Danielle LaPorte. And that's all for today. So thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning into Your Higher Frequency with Mind Love. Head to mindlove.com for a free gift to keep your vibes up until next week.